All right, everybody, welcome to the Made Fit Show. Now, today we have a truly inspiring guest who's been such an advocate for natural health for over 3 decades. So, meet Jared Sinclair, an herbalist and natural supplement formulator extraordinaire. As the driving force behind Vitality Nutrition, which is a beloved health store in Utah that's been helping families since 1977, which is almost as old as I am, Jared has dedicated his life to guiding people toward vibrant health through informed choices and effective supplements. Jared is not just a health educator, he's the mastermind behind the Vital five essential supplements that everyone should consider for optimal wellness. His wealth of knowledge spans everything from detoxing endocrine disruptors, huge in my book, to naturally combating depression and anxiety. And if you've ever struggled with digestive issues or hormonal imbalances, you'll have to pay close attention to his insights. As the host of the Vitality Radio podcast, Jared shares his wisdom with a wider audience, helping listeners navigate the often confusing world of supplements and wellness. Today, we'll dive into topics like decoding supplement labels, the hidden truths about pharmaceuticals, and how to reclaim your health without relying on drugs. So get ready for a fascinating conversation that will empower you to take charge of your health naturally. Let's welcome the incredible Jared Sinclair to the show. So before I have you speak, Jared, like we were just talking before I pushed record, I was so excited to talk to you, and your topics are I would sit here and talk to you for 5 hours because everything that you're knowledgeable about and you share with your audience is something I think my audience needs to hear. And so I had to poll my audience and ask them the top, I gave them 3 choices, even though there were many to choose from. I gave them 3 choices. And obviously, the top 5 supplements people should take did win, but not by a huge margin because all 3 topics were very interesting to people. And so this is, if anything, you guys for some reason can't finish this podcast, I want you to know that you need to chime into his podcast and to follow Mr. St. Clair, because he's just a wealth of knowledge on things that I know that you guys want to hear. So we did narrow it down, and we are going to talk about one thing mostly specifically. I think it will blow your mind. But just know he's not just a one-hit wonder. This man knows a lot of stuff and has a lot of things to share with you. So if you're not following him yet, I think you should. If you can't make it through this podcast, I just want you to know that upfront. I think he's one of those people that you will just gain knowledge from on a consistent basis. So, Jared Sinclair, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you. All of that is very, very kind, and I appreciate it very much.
You bet. So will you mind just sharing kind of just a little bit of who you are and what brought you to this point now where you're doing what you're doing? Everybody has their own unique journey, especially to get into the health and wellness space. And I'm always interested to hear how you did.
Well, it's funny because as a podcaster myself, I have a lot of guests as well. And that's one of the big questions, I think, because you got to have a little bit of background to understand who you're listening to. My story is pretty different than I would say most people in this space, because my experience has been when I'm doing my show and interviewing people like yourself, I ask that question, and most people have some commonality. They got sick, or a family or friend got sick, a family member or friend, or they were, frustrated with the journey they were on through modern medicine and decided to look at a holistic approach, that kind of thing. I got into it because my parents were already into it when I was born. My dad actually was working a part-time job maybe 10 years before I was born at a health food store, and he fell in love with health and nutrition and supplements and natural healing and that kind of thing. And then he ended up in the manufacturing side of things, manufacturing herbal remedies and things like that. And as kind of a side gig, he decided to open up the store that eventually became Vitality Nutrition when I was 5 years old. And so I quite literally grew up in the store that I'm currently recording this show in the back room of that store. Awesome. It was an interesting and different way to grow up, for sure. For one thing, in 1977, health food was considered just totally like, everybody was a granola, nobody was into it. You were a wacko if you thought that, all these new processed foods were dangerous, or that margarine was unhealthy and butter was healthy, things like that. But now we get to 2024 and we're like, people thought margarine was healthy, right? But back in the 70s and 80s, that was exactly what everybody was told, and really the lie that people were sold about food. And so it's been an interesting journey, but I grew up in the store. My parents had all of us working in the store just pricing product, taking out trash, all that kind of stuff. When I was 14 years old, that was the cutoff that my parents had decided was when you could actually work with customers. So at 14, I started working with customers and helping them find, whatever type
Wow.
of vitamin C they wanted or whatever. And by the time I was 15, they turned it over to me. I actually started managing the store. And then I bought it when I was 22, and I'm 52
Oh,
now. So I've owned it for 30 years, and that's how I got here.
that's exciting. Was there, in your young age, was there anything like in the store that kind of piqued your interest? I mean, was there a section, or being a young man, were you like really interested in the things that would help you maybe build muscle, or that would help you with the common cold? I mean, was there anything that just like you had your eye on?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because we not only sold the stuff, but we actually used the stuff. I have a lot of personal testimony of a variety of different things that we used. A lot of your listeners are probably familiar with a product called Emergency,
Oh,
little vitamin C packs that have been around forever and ever. And we took one of those every day from the time I went to kindergarten all the way until I left the house. We had one of those every morning, and that was the first kind of my first big love, because if we started to get the sniffles or whatever, then we'd have a few of them a day instead of just one to boost up our immune system. Then when Echinacea came around, and of course it's funny because I've been doing this for so long that I remember when a lot of these herbs weren't known. We didn't know what they did or how they worked. Elderberry was new, Echinacea was new, things like that. But I remember when Echinacea came out on the market, and they were talking about it boosting white blood cells and helping you with knocking out cold and flu symptoms and things like that. That was kind of our big thing. We had these really nasty tasting Echinacea extracts that my parents had, and then the Emergency. And so I was fascinated by all of it. I really like the sports nutrition side was always interesting. When I got to be kind of an older 19, 20 and up, because that's really when sports nutrition sort of took off, is in that range. When I was a younger man, 14, 15 years old, we didn't hardly have anything that you would consider for athletes at our store. But so the whole thing was interesting. It was always funny because I was the 14, 15-year-old kid that was talking to women about like PMS and hot flashes. And they're like, well, what does this kid know about this stuff? Right. And I actually had learned a few things and was able to help some people, and got a little bit of a reputation as someone that even at a young age could
yeah.
be helpful. So the
I
whole
love.
thing was exciting to me back then.
Well, did you remembering back now, did you rarely get sick? I mean,
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, when I was a young parent, I used to beat myself up every time my kids got sick because I owned a store that
ah,
sold Vitality. And
sure.
but then I realized, I actually read this amazing article by a guy. I don't know if you've heard of him, Dr. Ben Kim, Kim. Fantastic read online.
Mhm.
And he wrote an article basically for parents saying, hey, it's okay if
Let
your
'em.
kids get sick. This is how they build their immune system. It's by design.
Mhm.
And this is how it works. What I noticed as a young man that was different about me from my friends is that when I got sick, I tended to get better a whole heck of a lot faster. So I'd get the thing, but in a day or two of hitting the echinacea and the vitamin C and all this kind of stuff, I was usually feeling good. I wasn't missing 5 days of school. I was missing maybe one day of school, that kind of thing.
That's cool. That's were you were you picked on as a kid at all? I mean, because those that kid that brought the healthy lunch versus the Lunchables kind of a thing. Did the kids kind of notice that you were a little bit different?
It's actually funny because at my dad's funeral, I gave a talk, and eulogizing him. And one of the things that I chose to speak about was my weird school lunches. Because I had the strangest school lunches. We had, like now you go to the grocery store and you see blue corn chips. That's like a normal thing.
Yeah,
But they weren't back then. We had blue corn chips. We'd take them to school and people are like, what's wrong with your chips? There's something wrong with these things. And we had the funkiest beef jerky. It was this organic beef jerky that looked really different from, Jack Links or any of these big name
sure.
brands. But what was funny about it was the stuff was good, and we would do trades, and I had friends that would covet my lunch, that they
Really?
loved what I had in my lunch even though it was funky, or maybe because it was funky. So I was actually a little bit of a low level celebrity at lunchtime because my lunches were really cool and different.
I love that. Being a nutritionist now, I, as a kid, and my husband and I are high school sweethearts. We went to the same grade school, middle school, and high school, but started dating in high school. And we just joke about the rectangular pizzas and the licorice ropes that we would live on as kids. So I do remember the kids that had the homemade lunches, and I wish I was that kid. My mom was sweet and would just give me money and let me buy what I want. But
Right.
I kind of wish now that I know the difference, that I had parents that, were a little bit more picky for me, but she still did a great job. So I want to obviously dive into the topic, and would love for you to just kind of, and I don't know if because I don't know, I purposely didn't look at the five, your vital five. I didn't look at them because I thought maybe you would let me guess what these five are.
Sure. Take a stab at it.
Totally make a fool of myself. But the five that I'm just going to guess that you're going to say are a multivitamin, a probiotic, magnesium, vitamin D, and omega-3.
Well, you did really, really well. 4 out of 5.
Oh, really?
4 out of
Okay.
5. Yep. And technically you got 5, all 5 are right. But I think that if you get a good one, you can usually get enough vitamin D in your multivitamin.
Okay.
So this conversation is an interesting one because the whole Vital 5 started out because I started on local radio doing this show, Vitality Radio. And I was on the Utah Jazz Radio Network every morning at 9 a.m. for 12 years. And the funny thing about being on radio and not podcast is people don't find you on purpose. They find you on accident. They were listening to something else on the radio. You pop on, and if you sound interesting enough, they stick around. Sure. And that's how this podcast started, was on local radio. And I've done the podcast now for 17 years, the show total for 17 years, but only 5 years as a podcast. But the question that people kept asking me through those first few years of radio is, okay, I don't know anything about supplements. Where do I start? And I heard that easily more than any other question. And it's a great question because, like, if you come into my store, I've got 5,000 different products to look at. And so who knows, what's optimal for this person versus that person. And so I decided I better come up with an answer for this question that I was really comfortable with, that could be as universal as possible, because there is nothing universal in health, right? But as universal as possible, and then let people kind of branch out from there depending on their specific needs. And so as I was looking at it, some of them were obvious because you just look at the American diet and you look at the depletion in the soil and all these different things, and you can see what's missing. Magnesium is one of the most common deficiencies in America. Vitamin D3, you mentioned, one of the most common deficiencies in America. Omega-3, one of the most common deficiencies in America. So those ones are pretty easy to figure out. The multivitamin, I think, makes a lot of sense because there's just gaps. There's a whole bunch of little things that we're probably not getting that we could get. But I always qualify the multivitamin and the omega-3 with one word prior to the actual name of the product, and that is a great multivitamin or a great omega-3. Because I have an episode of my show called Centrum Sucks, and it's called Centrum Sucks for an obvious reason. And that is because the world's #1 selling multivitamin is a terrible product in so many different ways. So multivitamin doesn't mean multivitamin, right? We have to make sure that we qualify that with great, or at least good, in front of it. But once I started to become known for this Vital 5 thing, and people started to associate that with my name, then I actually started developing products to fill those 5. So I have my own line of products called the Vital 5, and they are by design trying to cover as many gaps as I possibly can in 5 supplements for people. But if the information that you hear on this show, you can take it and apply it to the supplements that you're using, the supplements you're buying, that doesn't necessarily have to be my brand. Certainly happy for it to be my brand, but you can do this with other great products as well.
Okay. Before we get into the 5 themselves, and I don't know if my audience has this question, but I'm working with a friend right now, and we're trying to figure out TMI, but I suffer a little constipation. Maybe you have something for me. But it's my daughter does. I want to say it's hereditary, but I can't wrap my brain around that. And I feel like I've tried everything. So anyway, we were going through the supplements that I take. And to me, I try to be very discerning, and I knew the five, and I think I take the five that I mentioned, which was
Mhm.
why it was easy for me. But there's other ones as well. By the time I was done, I was like, wow, that's kind of a lot of supplements. And so, in your opinion, obviously, or not obvious, we can overdo it. We can underdo it because, like you said, our soils and everything is just not what it used to be. Our food's not what it used to be. We're not eating enough variety of food. And then on top of that, we can easily overdo it, which can overload our liver and overload our body. So a happy medium. And I think the fact that you know, very strategic, picked five because it seems very doable that you do cover so much ground with just these five for the, otherwise healthy person that's just trying to be vital, that five, but you concur that you can really overdo it.
Yeah, the big challenge with supplements, and it's a funny thing. If you think about it, I own a health food store. I've worked in a health food store literally almost my entire life. I have access to very inexpensive supplements because I get everything for wholesale,
Mm-hmm.
or free supplements because oftentimes my vendors are happy to give me a free sample. So
Sure.
I don't have the problem that many people listening do, and that is, I don't have that problem that a lot of people listening do, and that
Yeah,
is budget. I can afford the supplements
sure.
because I get them either for free or for cheap. So then I have the opposite problem, and that is I have all these supplements that are available to me, but I only have so much bandwidth. We'll say, like how many pills do I actually want to swallow?
Mhm.
What pills ought I to swallow along with these? Am I going to create contraindications? These types of things. What are my priorities? And so the Vital Five, for the average person out there that doesn't have access like I have, I think covers the bases of, I don't know, maybe 80 or 90% of what you probably actually need in a supplement versus what you might want in a supplement. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So there's something that's very, very hot right now called NMN. Are you familiar with it?
Mhm.
Yeah, so NMN is a big longevity supplement. There's a guy named David Sinclair, no relation. I'm Saint, he's Sin, out there talking about longevity and
Yeah.
NMN and resveratrol and things like that. I take NMN. I'm 52 years old. The research is extremely compelling, and I'd like to be younger for longer. And so I'm on board with that. But I don't consider it a necessity. It's more of a luxury in my case, and it's a luxury that I'm able to afford more easily than some people listening to your podcast. And so there's the five basic things which I believe, and I don't believe this based on the research I've done. I believe this based on the actual evidence of people who I talk to on a daily basis who tell me when they add the Vital Five, it changes their health in a really significant positive way. And I hear that over and over and over again. And so I believed it and had faith that that would be the case. But now I've seen it over the last 10 years or so since I came up with it, that it really does make a big difference. And then you just have to ask yourself, okay, but what else is going on? Do I have arthritis? Well, if you've got arthritis, the Vital Five doesn't have supplements specific to arthritis other than omega-3 is a good anti-inflammatory supplement. But you might look into, something else for arthritis. Or do you have a family history of cardiovascular disease or a history of diabetes or, those types of things? Or maybe you're dealing with diabetes or pre-diabetes yourself. There are other things above and beyond the Vital Five that, might make sense for you. So my goal with the Vital Five was to cover as many bases as possible and as few supplements as possible, and then let people kind of pick and choose what they are interested in, what's necessary for them, and what they can afford and want to do, on their own after that.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I love that you have real life stories to back that up. As much as I love studies and research and papers and literature, um, nothing beats just seeing the lives change because of what you're doing for other
Yeah.
people, and to accumulate that over a decade is amazing. So can we kind of get into the reasoning for each one, why you pick those in your
Yeah, absolutely. And let me throw you the fifth one too, because we haven't got into that. So
oh
the
yeah.
fifth one that I put in there, and it's the one that stumps every single person. I've yet to
Okay.
have somebody say,
Good.
I know what your Vital Five is, and this
Yeah.
is one of them, and that is digestive enzymes.
Oh, okay.
Now,
Okay.
digestive enzymes, there's a little bit of a caveat with that because if you're under 30, you probably don't need them. But if you're over 30, and especially if you're over 35 or 40, then I believe they become far more vital. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But let's go ahead and
Okay.
start with the multivitamin
Okay.
because it's kind of the core supplement. And I want to also get a little bit more into that vitamin D3 thing. So you are in Mexico. I am in Utah. It's very,
Oh,
very different in December in these two places.
I'll send it
Right?
your way.
You can get all the D3 you want if you're willing to
Yeah.
go out and get it, right?
Yes.
So it does depend on the individual. I personally in Utah get a lot of outdoor hiking,
Good.
swimming, whatever. I'm out there getting vitamin D3. I don't use synthetic sunscreens. In fact, I don't eat seed oil, and I find I really don't even need sunscreen for the most part anymore.
Oh gosh, I wish you would say that again. Amen. Okay, amen to
So
that.
my wife and I stopped eating seed oil over 2 years ago now, and we don't get sunburned. We
Yeah.
go out and we don't have a problem. If we start to get a little bit of a burn, our little trick that's really cool, like we get a little pink and we come back, rather than even aloe vera or some of the more tried and true things, we actually use nano colloidal silver, believe it or not,
Really.
in a gel form and rub it on the pink skin. See, if people are watching, I've got this bald head. It's a great place to get sunburned. And if I'm ever going to get burned, it's right there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll rub that on. The burn never takes the root. I get no peeling, nothing. It's really amazing.
Actually heard that before. You're the second. I had someone come visit me and she brought it because
Uh-huh.
she said that her girlfriend had said, if you get sunburnt, use this. And I'll be honest, I was like, I've never heard that before. But now that I hear it from, um, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, here in Utah, the big university hospital is the University of Utah for burns, like third-degree burns and things like that. And they will immerse people in a tub full of silver water, basically.
Okay.
It takes the burn out. It helps to heal the skin and it prevents infection. So you can actually do that with a silver gel. I mean, I don't suggest that if you got a third-degree burn, I'd get to the hospital. But if you're talking sunburns and stuff, that stuff's
Yeah.
amazing. But that's sort of
Okay.
a sidetrack. So back to the multi. So my multi, and if you look at your multivitamin, if you own one and you're currently listening to this show, and you can get to your cabinet and look at it, you can look through this while you're listening to the show, or look through the supplement facts panel while you're listening, and see if it adds up. I guess is probably the best way to put it. I have what I consider to be enough vitamin D3 for people in that are getting some sun. And that's 2,500 units per day of vitamin D3 in the multi. And then always make sure that if you're going to have vitamin D3 as a supplement, whether it's in your multivitamin or separate, that you always balance it with vitamin K2 as well. That's really, really important. So, and I like about what looks like a 10-to-1 ratio. It's not exactly 10-to-1, but if you've got 2,500 units of D3, then about 250 micrograms of K2 is a really nice ratio. So ours
Okay.
has 2,500 and 280 on the K2. And then what I recommend to people that are in climates like mine is a little extra vitamin D3 and K2 in the winter months when they're not getting as much sun. So half the year I take it, half the year I don't, basically, the D3 and K2. And then you're looking at a couple of things that I think are really, really important when it comes to multivitamins. The biggest thing is looking at the B vitamins, specifically B6, B12, and folate, and making sure that they are methylated forms of B12 and folate. So you want a methylfolate and a methylcobalamin form of B12, not cyanocobalamin and not folic acid. And that's really, really important for about 40% of people in America who can't methylate vitamins. And that's a whole different topic. So we won't get into too much detail, but if you've heard of MTHFR, if you haven't heard of it, I definitely recommend looking it up. And I've actually got a show on that if you want to jump over to my podcast and take a listen. But MTHFR, about 40% of us have that genetic mutation. And if we do, then the folic acid in the multivitamin is actually toxic to us, not beneficial for us. So we have to be careful with that. So make sure that B vitamins are methylated. And then when you're looking at the mineral list, and now we're talking about like magnesium and selenium and zinc and these types of things, you always want to make sure that those minerals are chelated forms. Now, chelation is a little confusing because it can look a lot of different ways, but let's jump to magnesium really quickly so I can explain that. Magnesium, as it is mined out of the ground, is either going to be a carbonate form or what's called an oxide form. These are raw magnesiums, and it doesn't take a science degree to understand that we're not really meant to eat rocks. We're meant to eat food, right? And we're meant to get minerals from food and the food, let's just say it's a leaf of spinach that pulls the mineral up from the ground into the root system and then turns it into what's called an organic mineral. Otherwise, it's an inorganic mineral, the type that's actually in the rock itself. If you take an inorganic mineral, then your body has to try to convert that to an organic substance that the body can actually absorb. And on average, we're going to get like 3 to 4% absorption of that mineral. And so it's almost zero. And we run the risk of actually depositing some of that mineral that we can absorb into other parts of the body. And that's a real problem, especially with calcium. And we'll get into that in just a second as well. But if you're looking for chelates, what you're looking for on the back of a bottle is, let's just say that your bottle says magnesium. In parentheses, it'll tell you the form of magnesium. If it says oxide or carbonate in magnesium, we don't want that. It should say as magnesium citrate, or as magnesium glycinate, or as magnesium tartrate, or something like that. And a very, very quick Google search, if you want to do that, or even ChatGPT is great for this. You can just type in what's magnesium glycinate, and it'll tell you if it's a chelate or not. And so when you're looking at these, then you need to understand that chelate thing, because what's happening is, in a laboratory setting, instead of in the earth like the spinach, they're taking the mineral, the inorganic mineral, and they're taking an acid. Usually it's an amino acid from protein, or it might be citric acid or something like that, or malic acid. They're bonding the two together in using essentially the same process that nature does when it makes magnesium organic in that leaf of spinach. And that then is delivered into the body, and the body sees it as a food that it recognizes and can absorb. And so, like, my favorite form of magnesium is called magnesium bisglycinate. And what that is, it's magnesium bonded to two different glycine molecules, which is why it's called bisglycinate. And you're bonding magnesium to glycine, the amino acid. Your body sees the glycine and says, that's food. I know what that is. And it pulls the magnesium in with it. They call it a protein chaperone. They're basically, it's the protein, the amino acid, that's actually escorting the magnesium into the cell. And instead of 4% absorption, now we're talking like 35 to 40% absorption, which is obviously dramatically higher and better. So on the multivitamin, it's chelated minerals, it's methylated B vitamins. If you're looking at the RDA, or what's called the DV, daily value, on there, you want to make sure it's well above 100% in most things. Centrum is going to be 100% in everything, but 3 bowls of total will get you that as well. It's not enough nutrition. I don't even think it's really worth taking in most cases, and especially because all of the forms that are in your Centrum are low quality forms that don't absorb. So you're looking at a high daily value. The RDA is not accurate. It's not optimal. It was designed to keep us from dying, not to keep us optimally alive. And then one other nice thing that I don't consider necessary, but I do think is useful, is a whole food complex in there. Things like vegetable extracts, like spinach or barley grass or things like that, because all of those little micronutrients in there can actually help with the delivery of the nutrition from the vitamins and minerals as well.
Yeah, and I just want you to know, I am so antsy on my seat, because like my multivitamin is just in the next room. That's going to be the first thing I do when I'm going to go grab it. I'm just so interested, because to see that, that's fascinating. And I really appreciate that, because I don't think anybody, I hope people understand that, Centrum Silver is not something that, somebody over 50 years old should be taking. You give it as a gag gift, but you don't take it. But they don't
give it as a gag gift, though, because then you're giving money to Pfizer. Pfizer owns Centrum. They don't need more of our money.
Yeah, that's true. They're doing just fine. But that type of detail and what to look for in a multivitamin was invaluable. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you bet. All right. So how about magnesium next, then, since we bounced into that a little bit?
That's when we look at the golden child, right now of any kind of supplements or, nutraceuticals or anything, magnesium is in the limelight right now. Everybody tells everybody to take magnesium. So it'll be good to hear why and what to look for.
Yeah, you bet. And the thing about it is, we could spend an hour just talking about magnesium. I have multiple shows on my podcast just about magnesium. Yeah. So we have to kind of skim the top layer here, but I can give you the basics that you need to know, I think. First off, one of the things that we always need to look at is, what were we probably designed to have in our diet as far as nutrition goes. And if we look back a little over 100 years in America, the average American was getting about 600 milligrams of magnesium in their food without supplementing it at all. The average American today is getting around 200 to 250. So we're short 350 to 400 milligrams just right off the top that we're not getting. And that is because we are eating a lot more processed food, and the soil itself is so depleted in magnesium compared to what it used to be because of the modern farming practices that we just simply don't have it there like we used to. Now, back 100 years ago, there were different types of stresses. It was a lot more physically stressful lifestyle than it is today for most people, but probably not as intensely emotional or mentally stressful as what we deal with today. I mean, I've got, this thing right here, right? That is a little
Stress ball.
8-inch or 6-inch stress ball. Yeah, but not the kind of stress ball you can squeeze and feel better. It's the kind of stress ball that creates more, right?
Is that
And
is that a grandchild?
oh yeah, did I show? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's my little guy.
he's adorable.
So and that's the first unstressful part when I open up my
Right.
phone, right? And
Smart.
then the stress comes after that. But magnesium, our body utilizes magnesium when we're under stress, and the higher our stress is, the higher the magnesium burn rate is. So
Mm.
if we have high levels of stress, and that's if you're exercising, because that's a stress. It's if you're mentally stressed because of work or family or whatever, emotionally stressed, whatever it is, you're going to burn through more magnesium when you're under stress versus when you're not under stress. So if you ask yourself the question, two questions really, do I live in 2024? Well, 2025 by the time people hear this, I guess. So that's a yes, right? Because you're alive while you're listening to this. So you're already 300 or 400 milligrams short compared to your ancestors. And then what's my stress level like? And be honest with yourself. How stressed out am I? Not necessarily how well do I combat stress, because different personalities do better with stress. I don't ever really feel anxiety much, hardly ever. It's just not my thing. But I'm under a lot of stress. I keep myself extremely busy, and I definitely feel different if I have enough magnesium versus if I don't. So ask yourself those two questions, and you're probably going to say, yeah, I need to supplement magnesium. In fact, I always tell people, and this is one of my favorite ways to illustrate how important magnesium is. If you were to email me and you didn't tell me your age, your gender, your life situation, your health, nothing, and all you said was, Jared, I need to know, I'm willing to buy one supplement. What should I buy? I would always say magnesium. So it stands at the top of the vital five for me. And the biggest reason for that isn't, again, it's not just the research, because the research is clear, but it's the difference that I see in people that buy magnesium and come back in and say, oh my gosh, I feel better now that I'm taking this stuff. So it's a big deal. Anyway, so yeah, so there are companies out there, there's a couple of them that are saying you need 7 different kinds of magnesium. And
I want to stop you for a second, because as soon as you said magnesium, that's the first thing that went in my mind, because being on social media as much as I am, that's all I'm hearing about is how you have to take multiple forms of magnesium. So I'm glad to hear you talk about that, because that was going to be one of my questions.
Well, I'm glad. And it's an important question, because this is a marketing ploy. And the thing that is true, and nobody can argue this scientifically, our body needs magnesium, period. It doesn't need magnesium glycinate. It doesn't need magnesium citrate. It doesn't need magnesium oxide. It needs magnesium. The question is, how do we get the most magnesium into the body? And that is really what we ought to be asking ourselves. That whole thing I was just talking about with the 4% versus the 40%, with oxide versus bisglycinate, that's what we're looking at. How do we deliver as much magnesium into the body as we possibly can with as few milligrams that we have to take to get that? So when the company says that you need 7 different kinds, it's simply not true. Now, what is true is there are multiple different kinds of magnesium that have multiple different, slightly different benefits, is probably the best way to put it. So for instance, we're talking about constipation. That one came up earlier. Magnesium citrate is what I consider a middle of the road magnesium. From an absorption standpoint, it's good, but it's not great. It's not bisglycinate. But because a higher percentage of it flushes through the body as opposed to being absorbed into the body, it actually can act like a natural laxative. And many people have had really good success with magnesium citrate as a laxative. However, we always have to ask ourselves this question, and this one gets a little confusing. If I'm taking magnesium citrate and I'm enjoying the natural laxative effect, that's benefiting me, am I getting enough magnesium? And the answer is probably not. So what I recommend for people who have success with magnesium citrate as a laxative, and that works for you, that's fine. Keep taking it, but also probably add a little bit more magnesium bisglycinate. Now, not a full dose. You'll get more than you need.
Yeah.
You just have to experiment and let your body be the judge. How am I sleeping? Am I getting any kind of muscle cramps, particularly leg or foot cramps are big with magnesium? Am I feeling better under stress, or am I feeling more frazzled? What's my mental acuity like? Because magnesium plays a big role in brain health, and specifically brain health when the brain is kind of spinning, when there's a lot of activity up there and you're trying to sort out what's going on. Magnesium can help to calm that down and make a big difference. So you have to then experiment and figure out what's your key dose. But most people, I say, take like half a dose of magnesium citrate. If the bottle says to take 4 capsules, take 2, and maybe half a dose of magnesium bisglycinate. Optimally, you're getting your bowels moving the way that they should without the need for a specific magnesium, and we can talk about that a little bit too. But and in that case, magnesium bisglycinate, simply put, is the most bioavailable form of magnesium, period. You get more magnesium delivered into the body with that form than any other form until somebody comes up with a better version. But right now, there isn't one. The other one that I want to highlight really quickly, because I think it is very, very cool, is magnesium threonate. Magnesium threonate is magnesium bonded to threonine, which is an amino acid, and it more easily crosses the blood-brain barrier, making it really good for mental acuity, mental alertness, mental focus, cognition, those types of things. But magnesium bisglycinate does also cross the blood-brain barrier, just not quite at the same rate as magnesium threonate. And so many people find that if they just get enough bisglycinate, that's good. That's the form that I chose to put in my Vital 5 magnesium because, again, it's the most universal form of magnesium that I've seen. But be cautious. Magnesium is the hottest supplement on the market right now. There are lots of people saying a lot of things to try and get you to buy their magnesium. And the truth is, it's just not that hard. You just need a good bioavailable magnesium.
It's almost, I mean, off subject, but kind of like creatine. People all the time are like, what do you recommend? And I'm like, well, it's a simple ingredient supplement.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's what you're getting. That's all
Just
you really need.
creatine monohydrate works just fine. Yeah.
Same with magnesium. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Same thing. And I mean, magnesium is more technical because of that chelate, but yeah, it's not that hard. And the funny thing is, it's not funny, Melissa, is that some of these companies that are saying you need multiple different forms or you need 7 different forms, they're charging 2 or even 3 times as much for their magnesium as a magnesium bisglycinate. And clinically speaking, it's not going to be as effective, even though it has those 7 different forms. So marketing, that's one of the things that I talk a lot about on my show. In fact, I mentioned Emergency earlier and you smiled. You're familiar with it, right? And then I mentioned Centrum and I mentioned Pfizer. Well, guess who owns Emergency now? It's Pfizer that owns Emergency now. And back in the day, Emergency was owned by a great company, a great researcher that owned the company, fantastic people. He passed away. His family sold the company. Then that got sold to Pfizer, and they completely wrecked the formula. It's a less bioavailable form of vitamin C now. It's genetically modified form of vitamin C. So you don't want that product anymore. And so like on my show, I talk a lot about, which brands are still Integris brands, which brands are actually, walking the walk that they talk and all that kind of thing. So, and a lot of my show is about that, just helping people steer through the smoke screens of marketing and all that kind of stuff and figure out, where they actually want to put their dollars, because it's like money is a finite thing, right? We only have so much of it. So let's spend it wisely when it comes to our supplements.
Yeah. Jared, being in the world of, I hate the word, as an influencer on social media, it's all too common that, I know a lot of influencers will be sent products and there's a great commission. And so it will be the thing that people need. And I really appreciate that you have something out there to help people weed through the not necessary, don't need it, absolutely avoid.
Yeah.
Because
as much as possible.
Yeah.
It's tough because, one of the other topics that I present a lot on people's podcasts, that was one of the ones that I sent you as an option is, decoding supplement facts panels, right? Really understanding what do the supplement facts really mean? Because it might as well be Chinese to people that are looking at it for the first time, right? And there's a lot there. And so, that type of information is really helpful because from a marketing standpoint, everything sounds good, right? But the
Yeah.
question
Oh,
is,
sure.
is it any good?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's kind of the deal on magnesium. One little thing I want to add on magnesium, if it's okay. I talked a little bit about calcium. Calcium, we live in a society now, particularly in America, where I would consider us to be largely calcium toxic.
Mm.
They've actually done research that indicates that women who are over 60, who are supplementing calcium for the purpose of keeping their bones healthy after menopause, prevention of osteoporosis, that kind of thing, after 10 years, they have about equal bone density. So the bone density hasn't improved, and they have a 25% higher likelihood of heart disease. And the reason for that is because the calcium that they're supplementing is typically a very cheap calcium carbonate or something like that. And instead of getting
Mm-hmm.
into the bone, it's laying down in the arteries and creating hardening of the arteries. And we're getting that in fortified food too. So as much as possible, if you can avoid fortified food, fortified rice, fortified wheat, particularly if you find that you may be or do have the MTHFR mutation, because they're going to fortify that with folic acid, and they're almost always fortifying it with calcium carbonate. And then if you're buying nut milks or seed milks instead of regular milk, be really cautious there, because they throw a lot of calcium into those to try and mimic cow's milk. But it's not real calcium. It's calcium carbonate. It's a rock ground into a powder, and they're asking your body to figure out how to absorb it. And
That was
magnesium is the balancer to calcium. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say that that's very important for people to hear. And I know it, if correct me if I'm wrong, but calcium is kind of isn't it the muscle constrictor, where magnesium is the
Yes.
muscle relaxant? Yeah. So
Yep, exactly.
that balance is good. But if you've got too much calcium or a very, very poor kind of calcium, you're not doing your heart any good for sure. And my mom just battled breast cancer a couple of years ago. One beat the living crap out of it, and but she's been told to be on calcium.
Mm-hmm.
It's that because
And if she chooses to go on calcium, I don't necessarily have a problem with that.
yeah,
It's just that you have to be wise about it. Get a
yeah,
high bioavailability form like a hydroxyapatite. Make sure you're doing your D3 and your K2, because K2 is what delivers calcium into the bone, and magnesium, because magnesium and calcium are yin and yang. You've got to have a good balance of those two things. So it's
yes,
just a matter of understanding how to do it correctly. We end up with lots and lots of calcium without even trying in America. And then we have this big imbalance on these other cofactors.
yeah. Do some exercise. Do some
That's a
bouncing.
good one too. Weight bearing exercise, bouncing. Yep. Work those bones. Yep. They're meant to be worked, believe it or not.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how about if we jump into enzymes? Is that okay?
Oh yeah, for
All
sure.
right. I'm worried because I know I don't know how long you want to go here, but we've been going for a little bit.
I am enamored by you right now. I don't know if you can tell. I'm just looking at you with a huge smile on my face. I love what you're saying. So
Well, I
I'm good.
appreciate that. Well, the enzyme thing, I want to jump into that one because I don't want to undersell this one, because it's the one that nobody ever knows anything about. In fact, you mentioned probiotics, Melissa, right?
Yeah.
And the funny thing about probiotics is everybody knows what a probiotic is, at least the basics of it, right?
Yeah. Right.
When I say digestive enzymes to someone and I ask them if they know what it is, they say, is that like a probiotic? It's always conflated with probiotics, and it's not the same thing. Now, they do play a role in the digestive process, but they're not the same thing, even a little bit. So it's one that requires, I think, a little bit more education, and it's such a big deal. So the thing that we have to understand about enzymes is that we have a finite level of enzymes that we're ever able to manufacture inside of our body. When I learned this, it blew my mind. I understand this until, I don't know, it's probably 15 or 20 years ago now. But when I learned that, I was like, oh my gosh, everything makes more sense now. We are able to make enzymes, and it's like a trust fund. If you think about that, like you were left $1 million, and you can spend it quickly or you can spend it slowly. That's how enzymes are. But once it's gone, it's gone. And the problem with enzymes is literally when they run out, when your body can't make enzymes anymore, you die. You can't live without enzymes. They are
Yeah.
required, and the body is very, very wise. So as we use up lots of enzymes in our youth, and I'll explain that, in just a second. But as we use lots of enzymes in our youth, then the body throttles back and says, okay, I'm going to make less and less and less and less of these because you got to have this for as long as you're going to be here, dude. So we're going to go slower on this release of enzymes. So why do we use so many enzymes when we're young? Well, we tend to, when we're young, live a little bit more abrasive lifestyle, we'll say, right? We're ski jumping, we're mountain biking, we're beating ourselves up, falling and scratching our knees and all these different things. And the body releases enzymes to repair all that stuff and to reduce inflammation and to clean up the blood from toxicity and all this kind of thing. But the other thing that in America we do way too much of is eat a whole bunch of food that doesn't have any enzymes in it. The only place to get enzymes is in fresh, raw food. And we tend to eat lots of cooked, packaged, processed food. And every time you eat that, your body makes enzymes to break it down. And the more of that you eat, the more enzymes your body has to make. And so then again, as you get older, your body's going to throttle back production. So why does that matter when it comes to digestion? Well, if you understand the very most basics of digestion, there's basically four things that help us digest our food. There's the actual teeth. We only have those here, right? So every mother that I've ever met in my whole life has this ingrained in their DNA to say to their child, chew your food, slow down, right? You say it,
100%. I've said it. I've said it.
I think the good Lord put that there and said, okay, everybody needs to understand they got to chew their food. The other thing is that kind of gyrating motion that's like a washing machine in your stomach. Those two things are the physical things that break down food. But then there are also chemical things and natural chemicals, digestive enzymes, which are made in the salivary glands and also in the pancreas. Stomach acid, which is hydrochloric acid that the stomach makes, the proton pumps in the stomach make, and bile, which your liver makes and stores in the gallbladder. So those are the big four. And the interesting thing is, as we get older, three of those tend to diminish with age. We tend to make less enzymes, like I talked about, less stomach acid, and less bile. And many of us have had our gallbladders taken from us. And then we're making bile, but we're never having enough bile when we need it because our handy little storage sac for that has been removed. And so we're not getting the bile when we need it. We're getting a slow drip from the liver on a regular basis. All of that creates problems with the digestive system. So if you are someone who gets a little gassy or bloated after meals, or find yourself belching a lot after meals, or you get heartburn or acid reflux, or you are constipated or have diarrhea, or you have any type of IBS symptom, almost guaranteed you're deficient in enzymes. Now, it might not be the thing that's creating the issue, but it's likely part of the problem that's creating that issue for you. And one of the things that I love about enzymes, and it's one of my favorite stories to tell because it's how I got married, is they can be instantaneous. You take a multivitamin today, you probably aren't going to feel much today. You take omega-3 today, you're probably not going to feel much. Magnesium, you might. A lot of people feel that. Probiotics sometimes, but enzymes can be super experiential, especially if you're deficient. So I met my wife 7 years ago, and we met online. Both of us had just come out of a divorce, and I'm a weirdo. I own a health food store. She grew up with a mother and a sister that are nurses, and she was a CNA for years. And so very much in the medical field, and I'm very much in the alternative field. And so we met, we went out to dinner, and she barely ate any of her food. And I said, you don't like what you got, or, what's going on here? And she says, no, it's just that every time I eat, I hurt. Like everything that I eat hurts me. And it's gotten so bad lately that I don't eat much. And, I'm losing weight because of it. And she didn't have a lot of weight to lose. And I said, well, I can help you with that. And she'd never taken a supplement in her life, I don't think, at that point. And I said, yeah, let me help you. So we finished eating. We went back and we unlocked my store, which was already closed at that time. And I gave her a bottle of a product that I developed called Back on Track, which is digestive enzymes, anti-inflammatory herbs for the gut, and probiotics. And nice. I gave it to her, and I got a text from her the next day after lunch. And she said, I can't believe I ate lunch, and it's the first meal I've had in years that doesn't hurt. And it's still her favorite product. I'm pretty sure it's why she fell in love with me. Uh,
Smooth move.
I
Smooth.
know, but I have to say a warning. You have a pretty high level of female listeners in your audience,
Oh,
Melissa.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So here's the thing. This is a terrible story to tell. Don't go out on a first date with a dude and take pills from him. Okay, that's never a good idea. My
Good
wife
point.
got away with it. And she always says, when I tell that joke, she says, yeah, but it was sealed. And I'm like, yeah,
It was
I don't think I would do it. But
that's cute.
regardless, enzymes work, and they work the first time you
Yeah.
take them in many cases. And she would get cramping and pain, and then she'd have to sprint to the restroom and get rid of what she just ate. That was her story, and it was her story for years. And with some changes to diet and some changes to supplementation and all these different, and she didn't have a gallbladder, which is part of the problem, still doesn't. um, we were able to alleviate all of her IBS symptoms. She doesn't deal with that stuff anymore, but that was the first
Great.
thing, was the digestive enzymes. So they're a big deal. They're a big player. And if you struggle with any of those types of digestive discomforts, or if you're over 35 years old, because most of the research indicates that at 35, we're just not making enough to keep up, then it would behoove you, even if you're not dealing with symptoms, to take a digestive enzyme with each meal, because the enzymes you take then keep more enzymes in reserve. And the more enzymes in reserve we have, the more of all the other enzymatic processes that enzymes play a role in, we have for those needs, not just for digesting food.
Yeah. And Jared, if I can ask you a quick question, or just to maybe concur, maybe. So when I work with my clients, that have, gut issues, and we will determine that there's a good chance that, they've got low hydrochloric acid, and we supplement with hydrochloric acid. They always have the concern that, well, if I take it, isn't going to make my body more lazy, and it won't. And I always tell them, no, it's actually the opposite effect. You're going to digest your food better. You're going to get your nutrients so that your body will want to make the hydrochloric acid. With digestive enzymes, the same scenario. Like your wife, I assume she takes them, she's taken them her whole life, and that's okay. It's not something that you think you take for a short amount of time until all of a sudden you don't need them anymore. Sometimes it's something that you just need to take forever.
Yeah.
Not always, but sometimes.
Well, it's a really, really good question. And there's a couple of parts to it. The first thing is, when we going back to just the Vital 5, the Vital 5 are maintenance supplements. They're not supplements we use short term to get through a thing. They're things that we use on a regular basis to maintain or optimize our health. So that's the first thing. So that's why enzymes fit into this, because there's a bunch of things that I use occasionally. But these are things I use on a daily basis. My wife won't go without enzymes. And the interesting thing is, she can now. She eats food. It doesn't hurt. She feels fine. But our understanding of why enzymes are important, because you absorb your food much, much better. Protein, for instance, they've done some really cool studies. I don't know if you've seen these, Melissa, but they've done them on college athletes, where they've given them like whey protein and enzymes, or just whey protein. And the absorption of the protein goes up 30 to 40% when they have enzymes, which means you're getting 30 to 40% more of those amino acids that you're paying for in that protein product, or that you're paying for in the steak or the chicken or whatever else that you're eating. And so you're getting a higher level of nutrition because of enzymes, which is really, really big. But you're also taking a lot of load off of the digestive process. It's important to understand, too, if you think about stress in America, and we think about, well, everybody's ever heard of fight or flight, right? That's like this really common term that we all know. But the opposite of fight or flight is rest and digest. And it's called rest and digest because we are literally in a state of rest, hopefully, and we're able to digest two ways. We're able to digest food, and we're able to digest information when we're in that state. But when we are in fight or flight, our body turns off the digestive processes almost 100%. It's like an 80 to 90% reduction in stomach acid release, in enzyme release, in bile release. All these things are slowed down because the body is saying, I got to be ready to run or fight or something. I don't care if I just ate a steak. That doesn't matter right now. I got to be ready. And so one of the things that I tell people too, that's a kind of a side note, but it's a really important thing. If you deal with digestive issues, give yourself a break before every single meal. If you're rushing to eat the meal, slow down, or choose not to eat that meal. Maybe wait until you can do it, not in a rush. Slow down, do a little bit of breath work. If you're someone who's religious, say a prayer. Do something that takes you into a state of, I'm okay, I can chew my food, I can digest my food. I can be thankful for my food, and my food will do so much better for me. Our body will produce more of all the things that it needs. But that's the longest answer you could have possibly asked for. But the short version is
Excellent advice.
the more enzymes you take, the better you'll digest your food, but you will not turn off your natural production. Enzymes aren't hormones. Hormones pretty much will start to slow down production if you're replacing them. That's not the case with enzymes.
Thank you. They need to hear that. All right. So we, like I said, I can go forever, but I also don't want to take your time. We still have two left. Is there the Reader's Digest version of the two, or?
Let's hit probiotics because it's a little more complex, and we can go quick through omega-3s, and I'm fine. I've got a few minutes.
Okay.
Probiotics. This is 10 episodes worth of information. Okay. I mean, there's so much with probiotics, and the research on probiotics right now is so compelling and so exciting. Right. We are learning stuff that like almost daily now about probiotics and the microbiome and all that stuff that we didn't know before. But in the last 15 years, we've learned more than we probably had learned in every year prior to that when it comes to probiotics. And what I want to focus on here, because we only do just have a few minutes, is the types of probiotics. So we have what are called human strain probiotics. Human strain probiotics are what they sound like. They're the kind that are actually residing in our gut, in our sinus cavity, any place that has bacteria in the body or on the body. They're on our skin as well. Those microbes are human strain microbes. They belong there. They colonize there. That's their environment. That's where they're supposed to be. We also have what are called environmental strains or spore-forming probiotics. Now, these are found in dirt, dust, soil. They've actually found these probiotic bacteria. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but it's kind of crazy. They've found them in prehistoric dinosaur digs and have been able to activate them. They're incredibly resilient little bugs. And they're actually encased in a spore that protects them from moisture and oxygen and temperature and all these different things. But they're not native to the human microbiome, but they're common guests in the human microbiome is probably the best way to put it, because we get them in, we breathe them in, we get them on our food, we get them if we touch our hands to our mouth, all these different things. And they're what are called commensal strains. And a commensal strain is a really interesting term. Commensal bacteria basically does really good stuff for us, and we don't do anything for it. It's a total one-way street. We intake them. They're transient. They hang out in our body for like 30 to 45 days, and then they leave with our waste, and they leave the same way as they came, and they go back to the world. But while they're in there, they create two really, really cool things in high volume. One thing that they do is they create about 21 different natural antibiotics. Now, I don't want to conflate those antibiotics with amoxicillin. It's a very, very different thing. These are very friendly antibiotics. They wipe out pathogenic stuff like parasites and E. coli and strep and staph and all these types of things. They are produced when the body gets these certain strains in the gut. It produces these little killers that go after the bad guys, and that cleans things up for the microbiome. But they also create an environment where the body is able to, the human strains are able to colonize at a much, much higher rate. Basically, they create a lousy environment for the bad guys and a great environment for the good guys. And that's really important for a couple of reasons, because when you look at human strain probiotics, they are, frankly, they're kind of wussy. They're not real tough. We take them out of the gut, and they require refrigeration. They require a certain amount of moisture, but not too much. They require limited or no oxygen optimally. And, we typically don't want them above 70 degrees in temperature, whereas spores are capable of withstanding temperatures up to 450 degrees. So you can even cook them into your food if you want to. And so if you take a human strain probiotic out of the gut and then try to get it back into the gut, there's a bunch of issues. One is the storage once it's, in the bottle, whether it's in a fridge or on the shelf or whatever. But the biggest one is our stomach. We just talked about HCl. Our stomach is also known as the acid barrier. And the acid barrier is there precisely to prevent things that could kill us from getting into the gut. Things like E. coli and staph and strep and things like that. And so that acid is by design to kill bacteria on its way into the gut. So if we're taking a human strain bacteria, then the odds of it actually getting through that acid barrier and all the way down to the colon where it can colonize are very, very slim. Yet we do need those human strains. And the way that we lose the human strains, this is important too. Whenever anybody comes into me with any kind of gut health issue, any kind of immune issue, autoimmune issue, anything like that, or mental health issues, I always ask them about what I call their antibiotic history. And everybody's like, what's that? Mm-hmm. The antibiotic history is actually as simple as it sounds. How many antibiotics have you been on? And more precisely, how many were you on from the time you were born till the time you were 4 years old? Because the entire human adult microbiome is formed in that first 4 years, which is really, really important. Were you breastfed? Were you vaginal or cesarean section? Because if you didn't get mom's good guys, either through the breast or through the birth canal or both optimally, then you start out in a hole. Did you have ear infections as a child or strep or any of these types of things? Were you on antibiotics? If you were, then there's that right there is probably the catalyst for most of your health issues moving forward, at least in those three categories, in the immune side, in the gut side, and in the brain side. So people get annoyed with me initially when they come in asking me about anxiety and depression, and I take them to probiotics. But we have to recognize that the gut is king when it comes to what's happening up in the brain, right?
Serotonin.
So as we talk about this, and I can talk about this forever, so I get myself sidetracked sometimes.
Fascinating.
So the spores versus the human. You can take human strain probiotics, and those are going to be the ones that are going to start with lactobacillus or bifidobacterium. So when you're looking at, if you've got your probiotic at home and you're looking at it while we're having this conversation, look at those two things. If it says lactobacillus or bifido, and then it'll have a whole bunch of Latin words after it. Those are human strain probiotics. They're great. There's nothing wrong with them. It's what's in fermented food, so yogurt and sauerkraut and all these types of things. Great. But their survivability stinks when it's getting into the gut. But they aren't worthless. When you take these types of probiotics, their microDNA does not die when the probiotic dies. It's what's called a lysed bacteria. And when that lysed bacteria gets down to the gut, it actually has a conversation with our active live bacteria and gives it some marching orders, essentially, and says, hey, you can do this, and this is needed, and this is needed. But what they won't do is they won't colonize. And so we're never going to get out of a hole with human strain probiotics. If we're supposed to have, 100 trillion, which is what they say we ought to have in our gut, and we have 30 trillion, we're never going to get to 100 trillion by taking human strain probiotics. But we can get there with spores, because the spores will go in, they'll create this environment that all of the good guys can grow together and in a nice, even manner, because we really want a lot of diversity down there, not just a lot of numbers, but a lot of diversity.
Yes.
For optimal health. Then I am a huge fan of spores. So if you're looking at your supplement and you're wondering if it's a spore, first off, if it doesn't say lactobacillus or bifido, but it does say probiotic, it's probably a spore. But it'll normally say bacillus, not lactobacillus, but just bacillus, like Bacillus coagulans, Bacillus clausii, Bacillus subtilis. My formula is called Precision Probiotic Vital Spores, and it has those three in high potencies. And those are the spores that I recommend, because those are the spores that have by far the most good clinical human studies that have been done on them.
I love that. I love hearing that. I did a gut. I'm my own science project, and I always do. So I did a new gut test that's out, and it's kind of AI driven. So I was kind of curious about it. And so I did this test, and one of the things that came back that honestly blew me away was my diversity was low. And this girl eats very healthy. I take my probiotics, I do all the things, but I'm an Agent Orange baby, and I lived on antibiotics for the first, who knows how long in my life. So I'm sure that plays a big part in it. And for me personally, I didn't know that spore base was the place to go to increase the diversity and the amount. So that was again, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That
Yeah,
might be my favorite topic to talk about. I don't know
yeah,
how many
it's
shows I've done on
fascinating.
that. And for your listeners out there, look up the term psychobiotics if you're interested in the mental health side of things. It doesn't mean anything. It's a term that they've come up with that basically just means this is a probiotic that's been proven to help with mental health.
Oh,
And there are a bunch of them. And if you are struggling with depression, anxiety, things like that, make yourself aware of the psychobiotics,
psychobiotic.
because they can be really, really beneficial in these things. There have been some very good studies done on a couple, specifically Bacillus subtilis and Bacillus coagulans, but also Lactobacillus reuteri, which again is a human strain, and rhamnosus. I'm trying to think of all of them.
Oh
There's
yeah,
maybe a dozen, but they're important. In fact, I'm in the process. I don't know how long it's going to be because it's a lot of research, but probably six
sure.
months from now, I'll be introducing a psychobiotic combination that has all of the best
Mm,
mental health probiotics in the mix. So
so
I'm pretty
needed.
excited about that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, omegas.
Omegas. Okay, so omegas, this is actually probably a pretty simple one. We're deficient because most of us don't eat much seafood. It's really as simple as that. If you live on the coast, now where you are, there's plentiful seafood. So I don't know if you take advantage of that or not,
I do. I do.
but not so much in Utah and
Right.
most of the United States here. And lots of people don't love seafood, let's face it. And a lot of people are nervous about seafood because it's a dirty
Yeah.
ocean out there.
Mhm.
And so, wild caught Alaskan salmon is probably still the very best form of omega-3 in food. But if you're not doing like 3 7-ounce fillets a week, you're probably underdoing omega-3. And then the ratio thing is huge, right? I talked about how we don't do seed oils. And the reason we don't do seed oils is because they're very pro-inflammatory. And the average American is getting between 15 and 20 times as many seed oils as they are omega-3. So the ratio optimally is like 3-to-1 or 4-to-1, omega-6 to omega-3. And we're at like 15 to 20 to 1. So we're not even close. So even if we supplement a bunch of omega-3, we're not going to get to the ratio that we need, but we're at least getting closer. And then if we can reduce the seed oils, you're right, then we can get a little bit more like what we want.
Agreed.
So omega-3 is huge. It's the number one natural nutrient that our body uses to quell inflammation in the body.
Mhm.
And 85% of disease that kills in America is inflammatory in nature. That's all cancers, it's all cardiovascular disease, it's all neurological disease. So that's Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and ALS. All these things are inflammatory. Diabetes is inflammatory. And so the more anti-inflammatory nutrition we can get, clearly the better off we are.
Yeah.
But in terms of picking a good omega-3, there's a couple of things that you need to understand. One is that you need to have something that isn't rancid. And I'm going to tell you that I think there's only one way to know for sure. And nobody likes to hear this, but it's to bite your capsule and see what it tastes like.
Oh.
If it tastes kind of nasty, like really fishy, it's rancid. If it tastes barely like a hint of fishy when you bite it, it's still not going to be delicious. I'll admit that. But if it tastes just a teeny bit like fish, but almost not at all, you've probably
Yeah.
got at least a non-rancid oil. A rancid
Okay.
fish oil versus a not rancid fish oil, huge, huge difference in terms of nutrition.
Mhm.
And the problem is in America and in Canada, I don't know how it is I think in the EU it's this way as well, but I'm not sure the whole world. Um, there are very, very strict standards for the amount of PCBs, lead, mercury, arsenic, all that kind of stuff. So even cheap fish oil sold at Costco or somewhere like that is going to have a reasonable purity because they have to by law. What they don't have to be is fresh. They can be rancid. And the way that companies save money producing fish oil is at the boat itself when they're catching the fish. And I can't go into it in too much detail, but essentially they're going to flash freeze the fish or they're not. And that's an expensive process. If they flash freeze the fish and then take it back and process it and make fish oil out of it and put it in a soft gel capsule, then you're likely to have a fresh, clean, and pure omega-3. If your fish oil makes you burp, it's not definitely, but likely rancid, or you don't have your gallbladder, or it's not working really well, or you're over 50 and you're not getting enough stomach acid. There's a few reasons why your fish oil can make you burp. But if it makes you burp and you're burping it up all day, the first thing to check is, do I have a high quality fish oil or not? Because if you switch to a high quality fish oil and you stop burping, well, then that's the difference. So that's the first thing. If you're not willing to bite into your fish oil capsule, then I would just make a simple suggestion: buy a quality brand at a health food store. You can certainly come to our place, Vitality Nutrition. We'd love to have you. But go to your local independent health food store and buy it there, as opposed to a chain store like Costco or Walmart or those kind of places. There is a get what you pay for when it comes to supplementation.
100%.
And then the other thing that is important is dosage. Almost everybody is underdoing omega-3. The clinical research, and I looked up, there was a paper written years ago, and it was one of the most fascinating papers I've ever read, Melissa. It was a meta-analysis where they took a whole bunch of studies of omega-3 in humans, and they distilled it down to try and give us the best information we could possibly get. It was on the Mayo Clinic's website years ago, and I can't find it now, but I read it and I made a bunch of notes back then, and it was really, really interesting. It basically said that the median dosage for omega-3 to be a really effective dose for reducing inflammation, for reducing heart disease risk, for reducing well, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. Oh, mental health, for helping with depression, anxiety, some of these different things.
Mm-hmm.
The minimum was about 1,200 milligrams. The optimal was around 1,800 to 3,000 milligrams of omega-3. And that's not fish oil, that's omega-3. So when you look at the back of your label and you look at the supplement facts panel, what you need to see is how much omega-3 is in it, not how much fish oil is in it, because the fish oil is not 100% omega-3. Oftentimes on the front of the bottle, it says 1,000 milligrams. That's 1,000 milligrams of fish oil. On the back of the bottle, that probably will say 300 milligrams of omega-3. And so then if we're trying to get to 2,000 milligrams, now we're talking like 7 capsules. But there are really good brands out there. My two favorite, I'm totally biased on one of them because it's my brand, my Vital 5, where you take 3 and it gives you 1,980 milligrams of omega-3 in 3 capsules. And there's another one made by a company that I absolutely adore called Natural Factors, called RX Omega, Ultra RX Omega, and it gives you 2,150 milligrams in just 2 capsules. They're big, but it's only 2 capsules. So the big keys with omega-3: make sure it's not rancid. So you're buying a good quality brand, and make sure you're taking at least 1,200 milligrams of omega-3. But I think optimally you're shooting for around 2,000.
So can I ask you, Jared, real quick, when you're looking in the back of your bottle, are you adding up the EPA and the DHA together to get the omega-3?
That's a good question. They're the two most important. Well, okay, let me start over. They're the two most researched. We don't know that they're necessarily the most important, but that is the bulk of it. To give you an example, mine, the Vital 5 Omega, it's 1,800 milligrams of EPA and DHA, and there's an additional 180 milligrams of other omega-3s. And I do count those, because those omega-3s still count. They still help the ratio. They're still anti-inflammatory. Okay,
cool. All right. So when I spoke with your team, they asked me what I wanted to talk on. And I don't know if they told you this. They gave the list, and I came back with 3 that I wanted to talk about them all, but I came back with, I would love to talk about these 3. And they're like, that can't happen. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, surely. But I could still talk to you for another hour about just these 5. So I totally get it now. So tell them I apologize. I just couldn't wrap my brain around how you could educate us on the 5 supplements, but you blew my mind. And I still feel like I could just sit with you with a cup of coffee and just ask you a million questions about them. So I really appreciate that. And I would love to have you back on the show if you'd be willing at some point to just pick your brain about all the other things that I love. You're a great teacher. You really put things into bite-sized pieces. You make sense. You answer the question before someone has it, because you just are so knowledgeable about this. So this was such I love it. I'm going to re-listen to my own podcast several times, and I'm going to also visit your podcast, because you're the type of person that I like to listen to when I drive in the car or I take my walk, because I just really appreciate the way that you deliver it and how easy you make it to understand. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It really is my life's passion. I love what I do, and that it makes it easier. The coolest thing that I have, I'll leave you with this because I think it is. I have people ask me. In fact, somebody came in the other day, maybe 2 months ago, to the store, and she was really struggling. In fact, she was struggling so much. When she was talking to me, she was in tears.
Oh,
She has multiple different autoimmune diseases, and she's gone to this specialist and that specialist, and and she just hasn't gotten the answers that she's looking for. And I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a guy that knows a lot about supplements and about human health. And because I knew she was already using a bunch of supplements, and she wasn't having a lot of success with them. And I
yeah.
said, if you want to sit down and talk to someone who can hopefully at least steer you through that aspect of it and help you figure out some of these things, I'd love to sit down and talk with you. I feel, I can feel your frustration having this conversation. She says, okay, and she'd never met me before, and she'd never been in my store before. And she said, but what's different about you than anybody else I could meet with? And I said, I guess it boils down to two things. I don't know anybody, and this sounds so arrogant, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't know anybody that knows more about supplements than I do. I really haven't met that person yet. I'm extremely well versed. I've done it my whole life, and it is such a passion play for me that I just love digging into this stuff. And you
Yeah.
can tell listening to me that it's my thing, right? And I care more about you than I care about your money.
Oh,
There is something really important in this world of health that we have to recognize. It is very, very hot right now. You have to remember back in 1977, when my parents started Vitality Nutrition, it was a terrible idea financially. It wasn't the type of thing you did to make a lot of money. And in fact, the store was barely afloat when I bought it from my parents and hoped to turn it around and really, make it into a career, which thankfully I've been able to do.
sure.
But part of the reason that I was able to do that is because supplementation and nutrition got hot, right? There are people that
Mhm.
listen to podcasts like yours and mine and so many other people trying to figure out how to be healthy.
Yeah.
And there's so many influencers out there talking about it and everything else. So now it's this big thing, and there are billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars in it, right? Paying influencers, paying marketing dollars on Facebook and Instagram and all these other places. And that's fine, but it does kind of muddy the water a bit. And what I hope comes through when I talk to an audience, especially a new audience like yours that hasn't heard my voice before, is that you recognize that we're still doing this for the same reason my parents started it in 1977. I'm successful at it. I make money at it. I have to make money at it, and I'm not ashamed to make money at it. But that's not the reason we do it. We're incredibly interested in helping people optimize their wellness. We are very interested in helping people avoid pharmaceuticals. My show starts out with Welcome to Vitality Radio, the podcast where we help you master natural supplements, enhance your emotional vitality, and thrive without the use of pharma drugs. That's
Mm.
what we're all about. That's what I care about. And as much as possible, I hope to help as many people who want to listen with those goals.
Yeah, I will. I think you do with flying colors, and obviously your parents would be very, very proud. Can you share with the audience, besides Utah and your Vitality Radio podcast, where else they can find you to get information?
Yeah, so our website is vitalitynutrition.com, and it's still a family business. My son runs the website for me. My wife works here with me. Her two daughters work with us, and my oldest daughter works with us. So we're still a family business, although we have a bunch of people that aren't family now as well. But
Ended.
vitalitynutrition.com. There's a couple of things people do like about our little independent business that is a little different. If you go online and you say, hey, I'm trying to figure out the difference between this supplement and that supplement, we have a chat feature, and it's a real person. It's usually me or my son that answers those chats.
Okay.
Usually my son, but sometimes me if I see it pop up on my phone. And you can call our phone number anytime and say, hey, I'm curious about this question. And it can have to do with a supplement. It can have to do with whatever you want to talk about health. We'll take your call at 801-292-6662. And so before you buy, you can get educated. And we want to educate you. It is the difference between Vitality Nutrition and most people that sell supplements. We're trying not to market to you. We're trying to educate you. And in turn, that education does enough marketing. That's what we do. And so that's where you can find us. I'm all over Instagram at Vitality Nutrition Bountiful is the best place to find us there. Bountiful is the city that our business is located in. I'm on Twitter, but barely, or X, but I am doing more over there, doing some stuff on Facebook as well. We'll send you all the links so you can, throw them in there if you'd like, Melissa.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we're happy to help. And to answer, I skipped past it, but I would love to come back on your show. This was a pleasure. It's been a great time.
Yeah, I would love it too. So I'll get in contact with your team again. And this time I will listen to them when they say pick a subject. I'll be like, I get it.
Well, totally it was me. Full disclosure, I'm the one that said to Jessica, hey, tell her she's got to pick one. I can't do 3 in an hour.
Well, we will get to others. I just really, truly, I will let you go. It's a very busy time of the year right now, but I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate people like you, the big heart that you have, the time that you take to not only learn, but to share openly and freely. I think that is just so needed in this world today. And I always close my podcast with saying, I hope you wake up feeling prepared and go to bed feeling proud. And this is just one of those podcasts that I truly, I'm like, people are just, their minds are going to be blown. Not only that, but you're really good for my ratings because people are going to listen to this more than once because you give so much information. It's going to be on repeat. So. I know it will. So thank you so much. I will be in contact with your team. And I just want to let you know, this has been one of my absolute favorite podcasts that I've done in the past 3 years. So thank you.
I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome. So you guys have a fantastic day and look for Jared Sinclair again in the future, because I promise you I'm gonna bug that man until I get him on again at least one more time, because there's a few things that we need to clear up the air, that just like this episode that made you go, wow. I'm sure we have a few more of those episodes in the future. So thank you, Jared.
Thank you.
You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.